Hey gang, in this video, let's go over how to use parent group val in matrix reports. First, if you're not aware, parent group val is one of two Salesforce formulas specifically available for reporting on groupings. But if you're here, then you're probably handling some pretty advanced reporting needs for your org. Parent group val on its own takes practice, but even more so when your reports have both row and column groupings. So let's go over it together. By the way, this video assumes you know how to use parent group val in summary reports, which is a little less complicated. If you don't know how to do that or really want to ease into this lesson, then I suggest watching the linked video first since we move a little slower there. Okay, here we have the formula syntax for parent group val in matrix reports. So remember, those are reports that have at least one row grouping and at least one column grouping. So to start, let's break down the syntax more thoroughly. The first part of the formula calls for the summary field. This represents the field value that you want to measure. So this part of the syntax basically asks, what is the numerical thing you want to summarize? The second part of the formula calls for us to specify the row grouping level that we want to use in that calculation. So this is either going to be any one of your row groupings, assuming your report has more than one, or the grand summary for all your row groupings. The third part specifies the column grouping level to be used as well. So if you're familiar with using parent group val in summary reports, then you'll notice that this part of the syntax is what's new and different. And finally, the formula display. Now, while this step isn't part of the formula itself, it's still critical for understanding how parent group val is going to serve you in these reports. This section dictates where the formula output should appear, or more specifically, at which grouping levels the formula should be visible. So now that we've reviewed the syntax, let's take a look in Salesforce. Here we have an opportunities report with two row groupings and one column grouping. For our row groupings, we have everything grouped by close date year and fiscal period quarter. For our column grouping, we have our results grouped by stage. Now, before we get into business cases, let's practice getting the formula down so that it shows exactly what we want and where we expect to see it. For the first practice, let's use parent group val to show the sum of opportunities per year at the year grouping level. So for right now, we're completely ignoring our fiscal period and stage groupings. In the formula, let's set up our parent group val function. Let's add our summary formula. And let's plug the formula into the builder. So note that the builder may pull the summary syntax for the formula by default when you go to type it in. The syntax for matrix reports is what we went over, and it's also what's on the Salesforce help site. So don't let this part confuse you. Anytime you're dealing with a report that has a column grouping, you need to specify both the row and column grouping levels. And if you forget, don't worry because Salesforce will remind you and just error out like so. So for our use case, we're returning the sum of the opportunity amount at the close date level. So we'll set the amount sum as our value and close date as our row grouping. The next part of our formula requires us to specify our column grouping. But remember, I said we're not concerned about using the stage to grab our calculation. We want to know the total amount across all stages per year. So instead of specifying our stage column grouping, we'll use the grand summary system input instead. And finally, for the display, we're showing this amount at the year level. So we'll set the row grouping the close date year and keep our column grouping at the grand summary level. Okay, let's save and run. And there you go. You can see our total amount per year present on the close date year grouping level. Okay, gang, so let's test our understanding with a short little pop quiz. We have this calculation for total amount per year at the close date level. What if we wanted to show that total amount per year, but at each stage grouping? So basically for 2015, I want to show 2.4 million at the bottom of each stage grouping. Think about what change we need to make in the formula builder for that to happen. I'll give you a second. So if you guessed that we have to set the stage as our column grouping in the formula display section, then you'd be correct. Let's do that now and see what we get. And there we go. Our formula is now showing at stage levels now. All right, gang, last bit of practice. I want to show the total amount per quarter at each stage level. This will make it easier to compare the amounts per stage to the total for the fiscal period. Let's go into the report builder. In the report builder, we're going to set our row grouping level to be the fiscal period instead of close date. Now, since we want to show the total per period, we'll keep our column grouping to grand summary for right now. Then for our display, remember we're showing this within each fiscal period and within each stage. Oops. Well, this is how you know it's real life, gang. I'm doing something wrong here. And now that I'm looking at it, I see what it is, and maybe you do too. My row grouping is set incorrectly. It needs to be set to fiscal quarter in order to actually meet the exercise requirements and to work in Salesforce. There we go. That's much better. Okay, save and run. And there we go. Now we're seeing the total amounts per quarter reflected within each fiscal period per stage. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. So now that we've gotten practice, hopefully you're feeling more comfortable with how to navigate the placement of those grouping references in the formula. Let's take this up a notch and try out some more business-like examples. For our first use case, let's expand on the last exercise. Remember, we were curious to see the fiscal period total underneath each amount per fiscal period per stage. Well, it would be a lot more useful to our team if they could see what percent of the fiscal period total is reflected in each stage. That calculation is going to be the fiscal period amount within each stage divided by the total amount for the fiscal period. Let's set this up in our formula builder. Let's start with a clean slate and remove that practice formula that we were working with. To do that, I'll remove it as a column, and then I have to go into the field section and actually delete it from the report. Okay, time for a new formula. Okay, so the first parent group val function will grab the amount per fiscal period per stage. Let's set that up now. And the second will grab the amount per fiscal period. And before we apply this, let me change the formula output type since I said it incorrectly. We want this to be a percentage. And now for our groupings, remember we're displaying this for each fiscal period and for each stage. Bow, bow. There you can see that for each fiscal period, we've now calculated the percent by stage. Okay, now let's say we want to show the percent total per year within each stage. Put another way, we're showing the sum opportunity amount per year within each stage divided by the total per year. So this is very similar to the last practice. We're basically just changing our fiscal period references to close date references instead. Let's open the report builder and make these changes. And you know what? I'm going to cheat this a little bit and copy the formula that we just set up in the last exercise to do this next one. Take a second, think about what we're going to do with these. Save and run. And there you have it. In addition to seeing the percent per fiscal period, we've now shown the percentage per year for each of our stages. And to make this a little easier for you to see conceptually, I'm going to throw in some conditional formatting on the two formulas we've set up so far. Okay, so the orange highlights are from the first use case we set up, and the yellow highlights are for this one. Okay, last bit of practice, gang. This one will be a little different. For each stage, we want to show the total opportunity amount as a percentage of the total opportunity amount in the entire report. So that calc is going to be the sum amount per stage divided by the sum amount across the board. Let's open the report builder. For our first function, let's grab the amount per stage. Since we're only concerned about stage, meaning we're unconcerned with our row groupings, we'll input grand summary for our row grouping. For our second function, we want the total in the entire report. So in that case, what are we going to plug in for our groupings? If you guessed grand summary for both, then great work. Because remember, we want the total opportunity amount in the entire report. So in this case, groupings don't matter one lick. Now, let's think about this display. Those totals are going to appear at the bottom of our report underneath each stage. So that means our column grouping is definitely stage, but our row grouping should be grand total. Let's add that conditional formatting one last time. And again, gang, we're doing this step just to make it easier to visualize what we're doing in the formula builder, not because you have to do this. Let's scroll down. And there you have it. Our percentage is properly reflected in the bottom of the report. And that's how you use parent group val and matrix reports. Keep in mind that practice is going to make perfect here. The parent group val function on its own isn't all that intuitive, my opinion, let alone when you're using it for the most complicated Salesforce report type, also my opinion. But challenge yourself anyway. Even to make this video, I thought about what values I wanted to show and where I wanted to place them, and then guessed what the formula syntax might be before setting up the formulas and running the report. And obviously, even I can mess that up. The other thing is that this is easier to understand once you've got the summary report formula down. So if you skip that step and are feeling shaky on matrix reports still, I really recommend getting up to speed on the summary report syntax first, because the matrix report syntax is really just an extension of the summary report formula anyway. And finally, keep in mind that just like with summary reports, there will be combinations of displays and grouping references that simply won't work and will give you errors in the formula builder. When that happens, toggle your display settings and/or your grouping references to figure out what will stick. And there you have it, gang. I hope this video was helpful for understanding how to leverage parent group val and matrix reports. If it was, please give this video a thumbs up, and for more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. Thanks!